How long does a divorce normally take?
I say about 6 months. It's going to take to get you a pre-trial date where you're going to get in front of the judge and have an agreement accepted, but it could take upwards of 2 years.
Is a home necessarily 50-50 divided, or how is it?
We take the value of the house, what's the equity. If there's 2 parties, then yes, we split it 50-50. But believe it or not, there are situations where, 3 or 4 people own the house, and now we're trying to figure out how do we split that.
Speaking of children, how does that custody?
Custody in Massachusetts is starting at 50-50. That myth that mom always gets custody is no more.
How much it costs for divorce?
Nobody's really getting divorced for under $7,500. It's a very expensive process.
Welcome everyone. Today we're talking about something that affects millions of Americans, divorce and first marriages. Statistics says 40% of marriages end up in divorce. Second marriages is 60% plus, and third marriages is 70 plus. So today we have an expert coming from Stopper and Associates, Morgan Brennan. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Today we're hoping to provide a lot of information for you so you can hopefully navigate through this challenging and a lot of times emotional process. So starting right into the first topic, how long does a divorce normally take?
So the answer really is it depends, as will a lot of my answers be.
Yeah.
I say about 6 months. It's going to take to get you a pre-trial date where you're going to get in front of the judge and have an agreement accepted and a divorce decree finalized. But the answer varies on everybody in the process and how spouses handle different aspects of divorce.
Yeah.
So it could take upwards of 2 years sometimes.
And how do one determine as far as child support and alimony, how that gets, decided?
So child support is pretty easy. It goes off of everybody's income. So we look at each spouse 1 and spouse 2. Spouse 1 usually will, if they're the breadwinner, they're going to pay the child support. We look at what the difference is in their income. There's a percentage formula that we work with.
Yeah.
And the state has a nice little calculator that we run it through. The state looks at things like child care costs and medical insurance, health and dental insurance, when looking at how much either parent is going to pay. And when we talk about alimony, we have this new case out called Kavanaugh, and it said that you can get alimony and child support, but we have to look at the tax benefits of that. So we also run it through a calculator, and it's determined on a percentage of the paying spouse's income in comparison to the not paying spouse's income.
And is it something that normally has to go through court, or can it be settled out of court? How does that normally,
so
what's
divorce,
the options there?
Divorce has to be settled in court, but it could be disputed out of court before we go into court. Okay. We have something called a joint petition. In a joint petition, we agree that we want to get divorced. Now we're going to stay out of court for now. We're going to hash it out. We're going to make an agreement. When we're ready, we take that agreement to the court. We file a joint petition, and it's kind of as easy as that. Now we go to court and the judge makes sure there's no flaws in our agreement, and then we get a divorce decree. When we have something where the parties don't agree, a lot of the time it comes in when there's children in the marriage. Okay. We then have to do a complaint for divorce. And that means that we're filing, it's contentious, we're in and out of court constantly. It's more of what you're going to see on TV. Speaking
of children, how does that work as far as like custody, or if someone's in the home, like, I guess when there's real estate's involved?
Custody in Massachusetts is starting at 50-50. That myth that mom always gets custody is no more. We start at 50-50, and then each party has to tell us why the other party shouldn't have 50-50. Yeah. So we try and work on a fair schedule because we think that all children should be with each parent during their child rearing years. Yeah. And a big thing that comes into child custody is who lives in the marital home, who's staying there during the pendency of the divorce. Whether it's rental or own, that is the place where the children are most stable. So a lot of judges want them to stay there for as long as they can, because it's a hard process to go through divorce.
What can you tell us if a spouse may be hiding assets during the process?
So it's pretty hard for a spouse to hide assets in a divorce. It's something that I have a lot of clients that come to me with. Crypto's really big now, and it's hard for people to find accounts like that. Especially when you're in a DV situation and maybe your spouse doesn't let you have access to anything. But in a divorce, we have what is called supplemental discovery, and it's required. It's things like tax returns for the past 3 years, bank accounts, retirement accounts, loans that you've taken out, whether for a car or a mortgage. These are all things that you have to provide, or else we ask the court to order that you provide it. And if you don't get divorced until you do provide it.
And how about child support and anything that's been agreed upon as far as custody? Can that be modified later?
Yeah, so things like child support, alimony, custody, they do not become final on a judgment of divorce. We leave them open to be modified with the court. So it's as simple as filing a complaint for modification with the court. Now we can go back in when there's a change of circumstances and ask the judge to change that or agree to change it.
And what examples of change of circumstances could bring a potential modification? So,
when you talk about child support, say at the time of divorce in 2018, dad made $600 a week and mom made $400 a week. But now mom's making $1,200 a week and dad's got a big job. He makes $3,000 a week. Well, that's a change of circumstances. Say now the kids, they're in daycare and they have daycare costs and dad is covering medical. That family situation has changed. So now we need to go back to court, look at that agreement, recalculate that child support, and get a new order out there.
Is that a pretty quick process in that, since like most of it's established, it's just a matter of modification? Or?
So it depends. Dad might be mad that mom is making him pay more child support, so he might fight it. And so maybe we're stringing it out. It could end in trial. Every complaint can end in trial. If we're agreeing, we could be quick, but if we're not, we might be at trial.
And what if the spouse is not going along with the court order? What if they are not following it?
Yeah, so we have something called a complaint for contempt in Massachusetts, and it essentially is a complaint to the court saying, hey, my spouse isn't following the child support portion of our agreement. They haven't paid X amount of dollars in child support and you need to order them to pay it to me. So, we go into court, it's a pretty quick hearing, and the court either orders that he pays it, how he pays it, or they say, no, he paid it, maybe you're lying, maybe you don't have proof.
When someone asks typically how much it costs for divorce, I'm sure, obviously there's a lot of variables there, but just to get kind of an idea, is it like a starting point where they need so much money to start, and then, is there retainers? I don't know how.
Yeah, so in family law, we always take a retainer. Specifically in a divorce matter, I ask for $7,500 because my philosophy is nobody's really getting divorced for under $7,500. It's a very expensive process, but certainly if the spouses all agree and there isn't a lot of contention, it could happen for less.
And do both spouses necessarily have their own attorney, or was one has an attorney, maybe the other one's representing himself? Is that a thing or not?
Yeah, so I have clients who, I'm their attorney, and then their spouse is pro se, what we call it when you represent yourself, or they end up getting an attorney down the line. You are allowed to represent yourself in Massachusetts, especially in probate and family court. It's definitely easier when you do have an attorney, and I encourage everybody to have one, because there's so many laws and rules that you don't know about when you represent yourself, that it makes it hard to make sure that you're doing the right thing for yourself.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but if you're representing one client and the other client doesn't have representation, but you have to more or less act as a facilitator somewhat to have a conversation with others?
Have to treat the other spouse as if they were an attorney, their own representative. So I can't give them legal advice. I can't act as a mediator between them. I can converse with them and try to come to an agreement, but I can't really give them advice of any type.
So in a case where they own a home, who gets to stay in the home?
So a lot of the time we look at factors like who does most of the child rearing. who has the ability to pay to stay in the home, who wants to stay in the home long term, potentially doing a buyout of the other spouse, and who is the spouse that makes more money and can afford to go somewhere else or can go somewhere else, because that becomes a big issue with lower income clients who don't necessarily have another place to go. So the quick answer is whoever can afford to stay there can stay.
Is a home necessarily 50-50 divided, or how is it? I guess how is it divided?
Yeah, so we take the value of the house, what's the equity, and if there's two parties, then yes, we split it 50-50.
Yeah.
But believe it or not, there are situations where 3 or 4 people own the house, and now we're trying to figure out, well, what's this married couple's portion of the equity and how do we split that?
Yeah.
But in a common divorce, you're gonna see that when we do a buyout or when the house sells and they get those seller proceeds, it's gonna get split 50-50 unless we can agree that something else is owed that needs to make it smaller or larger.
Now, what if only one spouse is on the deed, on the title as owner, and the other one's not?
Yeah, that's a common thing that people ask me, and it doesn't matter. Even if it was acquired during the marriage or it was acquired before the marriage, but it then turned into the marital home, one person being on the title no longer matters, because your marital funds were used to pay for that home, to renovate that home, to maintain that home.
Who's responsible for maintaining, as you mentioned, so if someone's living there and the other one's not living there, who's paying the mortgage, who's paying the landscaper, the utility bills, things like that? How's that normally covered?
Typically, the person that's living in the home is going to have to cover all of those bills. There are circumstances where maybe we have a stay-at-home mom or stay-at-home dad, and the other spouse is the breadwinner, and they pay all the bills, and mom's job is to watch the kids. Then we'll stipulate and say, well, you have to keep the status quo in a marriage, even during divorce.
Right.
So, the other spouse still needs to pay those bills and maintain that house, even if they have to go somewhere else.
So what if one spouse is not able to financially buy the other one out? Do they have to sell the house?
Typically, the options are sell the house or do the buyout. If both spouses can't, one or the other, do a buyout, then we have to sell the house because there's nothing else that can be done with it.
What if market conditions are not favorable at that point, or maybe they owe more on the mortgage balance than what the house is worth? Can they wait off and not sell it and wait for the market to get better? How does that work?
It's possible to do that. It's not very common. Judges don't favor it. A lot of the time it leaves things open. We can, now we're still dealing with a house that was split in a divorce maybe 2-3 years ago. Why is it still there? So I don't know if there's a lot of judges in Massachusetts that will allow it. They might force you to sell, and then the other marital assets have to come in to pay off that balance.
How is the value of the home determined?
So we use realtors and we use appraisers to come into the house and give us their fair market value. Then we decide, well, is a buyout possible? If a buyout's possible, then we're gonna go back and forth. We're gonna agree on a number for value. We're gonna cut the mortgage out of that and then divide it 50-50. If we're gonna sell, then usually we get an estimate of what it could sell for, and then we leave it up for the market to decide.
And what's an appraisal usually cost roughly for, like, say, a single family home? I know it's probably more for a multifamily.
Most of the appraisers that I've been seeing have been coming in at around $500 to $600 for an appraiser to come in, but I like to go the realtor route first to get a good idea. I have a lot of realtors that come in and have good CMAs to give me an estimate, and I like to work off of those. What
do you feel is a difference, if any, between the licensed appraiser and the CMAs you're getting from a realtor?
I think the biggest difference that I see is that an appraiser really gets to get in there and look at the age of things and how weathered things are. But a lot of the time, their prices come in pretty even. And a lot of the time I tend to go with a realtor for a CMA first because I know it saves my clients money. I trust my realtors, and I don't think an appraisal is 100% necessary unless we're in really deep on getting that number agreed to.
And if you're using a local realtor that may know the market better too, right?
That definitely comes into play with me.
Because you could have towns and cities that have different pockets in them that are worth more than a couple streets down the road, but an appraiser might not necessarily know that, right?
Yeah.
But you know, there's certain neighborhoods and certain areas that just bring more money, right?
Yeah, and you know, I have an appraiser who comes up from Rhode Island for a lot of people in Foxborough, where my office is located.
Yeah.
And you know, I don't think that they would be as great at Middlesex or deeper into Massachusetts, being so far away in Rhode Island.
So now you have the value of the home, and then what do you prepare for the spouses at that point? Can you do a seller net sheet that will have, you know, the likelihood of what the house would sell for minus all their costs of sales, paying off the mortgage if they have one, type of thing, and it kind of have what their net would be, right?
Yeah, so we kind of leave that up to our and our closing attorneys. It's hard for us to what all of those costs are going to be. So, you know, I always tell my clients, hey, this is what you could get. This is the
Right.
But you know, you got to take in all of your closing costs and what you have to pay from it. So it's going to be less than what you think you're going to get. And I always tell them, you know, go to your realtor or your closing attorney, and they can give you an estimate.
In the case where they have a mortgage, the divorce judgment, how does that play into, like, you know, the mortgage, that the liability of the mortgage?
Yeah, so it doesn't protect the spouse that doesn't want to be in that mortgage at all. We have that divorce decree, and the spouse that wants to continue to own home and that spouse out, they can use that to get their name taken, to get the other spouse's name taken off the mortgage. But the divorce decree essentially just says we're not married anymore, because you can still jointly own property but not be married anymore. So it's really important for spouses to know that when they want to get taken off of that mortgage, they need their spouse to refinance or take out a new mortgage, because your name is legally on there until a closing happens and you sign a deed over to your spouse that takes your name completely out of title.
Now, understand that real estate is probably one of the biggest investments. How do the other type of assets work, like cars and jewelry or other type of personal property?
Yeah, so usually everybody takes what's their own, right? You know, one spouse has a lot of jewelry, well, it's her jewelry. Everybody takes their own clothes, their personal effects. I do have some clients who they have to go through the house and make a pile and make a list for us, you know, and that list goes in the agreement of, well, I'm going to take the crock pot. Okay, well, I'm going to take the air fryer. But when we talk about retirement accounts and cars, it kind of is cars, everybody takes their own. Retirement accounts,
401ks and all that.
401ks, IRAs, now that's marital money. Your spouse put that money in there and it accrued, and you paid into that or not, you own that. And so 401ks, retirement accounts, IRAs, whatever you want to call them, they get split 50-50 unless we agree otherwise.
How about pets? You know, people love their pets. They're like part of the family. I've seen it before where couples, you know, separate and, you know, one's taking a pet for the week and the other one's taking for the weekend. So how does pets come into, they just leave it up to the spouses to figure that out?
So I actually have some clients that, you know, pets were maybe named in the agreement, but it's important to know that in Massachusetts, we do not uphold pet custody agreements. It's something I have to tell my clients, but I will help you argue with your spouse why you should have certain parenting time with your pet. And spouses are good about it, going on a schedule, especially when it's that beloved cat or dog that they need.
Yeah, I would think, especially like emotional support animals too, right? That's a whole nother, What if one spouse refuses to list and sell the property? What happens then?
So we can go to the judge, we can file motions, and we can have the judge order that they have to work with the listing agent within a certain number of days, within a certain amount of time, or they have to pick a listing agent. There's always ways to go to the judge and get an order. So, you know, everybody always has.
In addition to that, you talked about realtors. Certainly we've worked for a lot of divorce spouses in the past and selling their real estate. What if one side wants to go with one listed agent and the other one wants to go with another listed agent? Do they just pick a non-interested party and go with someone they don't know? You know, how does that work on who actually is a realtor that gets hired for the?
Yeah, a lot of time I have clients that, you know, they interview the realtors and can come to one, but if they're stuck, they cannot come to one that they want to use. A lot of times when there's another attorney, we agree, well, if we can't agree, then the attorneys will agree. We'll agree for you and pick that.
How does real estate factor into alimony and support?
You know, if we're saying that spouse 1 is going to pay the mortgage for spouse 2, but spouse 2 also is allotted alimony, then we're going to reduce alimony in accordance with what real estate costs, spouse 1 is paying. But if we have a situation where we're selling the house, there's not going to be real estate anymore, any cost or any proceeds that you're getting, they don't affect alimony. That's just a marital asset, and alimony obligation is still there.
So going back to the beginning, where does one start as far as, I know you mentioned the retainer to get, to hire the attorney to get that started, but is there a prep list that the spouses can work on and start gathering information together, like a checklist that's going to be given to them so they know where to start?
Yeah, so me personally, I have a lot of checklists and letters that I give to my clients. It can be overwhelming, but the more information that you can give your attorney up front, the better in the long run. I, give a confidential sheet that they can fill in everything and anything that has happened during their marriage. I have a list of supplemental documentation that I talked about earlier that is required to be given to each spouse before anything can happen with a decree of divorce. And then I like to personally give my clients a copy of every single law that is going to affect them in this divorce, specifically the restraining order that is on all of your bank accounts and your retirement accounts as soon as you file for divorce.
Well, sounds like you're very prepared, and you certainly prepare your clients, which is great.
Yeah.
If someone wants to know more information or get in touch with you for any questions or services, what's the best way they can get a hold of you?
Yeah, so they can call my office at 508-543-0600, and our office manager is more than happy to get me on the phone with you, or email me at morganbrennan@stopaandassociates.com, and I'm always happy to chat.
All right, awesome. Well, thanks for coming in today. This is a lot of great knowledge. I learned a few things myself, and it's all about education and helping our clients. So hopefully you guys got something out of this, and if you have any more questions or need any services, feel free to reach out to Morgan, and thank you for coming today.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank you.